I read Creepy Presents by Richard Corbin. Yeah, that's the cover. So yeah, to talk about the artistry, it's definitely creepy, doing a good job at representing the eerie vibe of the whole book, or the stories I read at least. So, just flip. This is one of the artworks before the story. A dragon. I think that's a dragon. Yes. And a lady. And then just some collaborators, if you want to see that as well. Show the contents. So then, these are the contents. I'm going to try and get this as close as possible. Hopefully you can see. And then forward, but I'll briefly show that. I don't think you really need to see too much of that, to be honest. But yeah, then just more of the contents. Okay, and so then this is the first. Well, okay, I'll show you this before. It's just another cover or another picture, which is just sharks and a man, violent, I guess you could say. And so the first story that I read is called Frozen Beauty. And once again, Richard Corbin. Sorry, let me move this. It's pictures. So basically, in this story, they talk about. So then, this guy, I'm having a hard time remembering.
Sorcerer.
The sorcerer goes and he meets with this lady named Maliva, and I'll show you her in a second. But at first he thinks Maliva is this young woman right here. So because then he says that he had to wait to go in and see her, and he's like, why would I have to wait? She made me wait 2 days to see her. And so he walks in and he thinks immediately that that's her, but then he actually finds out that it's Maliva's niece. So then you see Maliva, it turns and you see her, and she looks nothing like what he thought she would look like. She's actually kind of ugly, not to be rude, but she's just kind of distorted and kind of creepy looking and just all around kind of weird. And so then I think he's probably thrown off by how she actually looks because he didn't expect that. And so then you see they start walking to a place. So basically she talks to him and she's like, I want you to perform a spell so I can look like her, because she's young and she's beautiful, and I want to be young and beautiful instead of looking like how she looks, which, as a reminder, that's her, and that's the niece. So as you can see, pretty young, not so pretty, not so young. So she wants him to perform a spell to make her look like that, because she said a line earlier that said, yet beauty is so often wasted on the young, and that's when she said that right up here. Sorry, wait, let me show you that better. Right up in this corner, yeah, right there. She says that, and so basically she's just saying she wants to be young and beautiful. And so then they walk to a cave, I think, and the girl appears to be like drugged or just out of sorts or something. That's what the sorcerer says, at least. So that's right here is where they're going. They're walking the cave, or on horses. And so then they go, and basically she tells her to drink something, and then she freezes almost. So that's why I think the title of the comic is called Frozen Beauty, because A, she froze the beauty, and B, when she gets changed, she's almost like frozen beauty, essentially. Like, she's forever going to be beautiful in that time, but as you'll see later, that might not be true. So then she freezes, the niece freezes. I'll show you that. She kind of is just standing in the corner, like right there, as you can see. And so she freezes, and then the sorcerer performs the spell on her, and then she morphs into looking just like her niece. Beautiful, young and beautiful. I'll show you that. So as you can see down there, she's changing. Her face becomes tighter, she looks younger. And then here, she's completely transformed. She's very happy. And so then they end up, the sorcerer's like, oh, where's my reward? But then one of the soldiers, he, like, I assume, it looks like he kind of stabs him. Yeah, is right there. He kind of aggressively stabs him. And then leaves him in the same spot to freeze or to just stay there. And so then she's happy. As you can see, she's dancing. Maleva is dancing, happy. They use the word, like, they say that she is, no, they say gay revels were held. So, like, you know, they were all happy and having a good time. And she was especially happy because now she's young and beautiful. But then all of a sudden, she gets like a weird pain. She screams and is thrown off, and then her face becomes like butchered, so, you know, ripped apart or kind of just disfigured, really. So that's what it looks like. And so then everyone's like in shock, like, what's happening? And then you see Darman hunched, which is the sorcerer, by the way. I forgot to mention that. And he's in the cave. He needs nourishment because he's hungry, so that's him, hunched over. And then you see him kind of debating how he's gonna get nourishment, like how he's gonna eat. And then he said, with slow starvation, and then so basically he turned her back into, like, he butchered her.
Eating her.
Yeah, he ate. So I guess he ate her is how he got his nourishment. So that's the end of that. And that's the end. And so I think in this, the illustration was detailed and specific, and I think the black and white contrast really helped to magnify the creepiness of the story. And I think a lot of the little details, like the blood in this image splattering, I think that also does a good job at showing how, like, she's being disfigured and obviously in pain. So that's that story. Then I also read A Tangible Hatred by, obviously, Richard Corben as well. And so this is what that sort of cover kind of looks like. So that's the monster. And so the first page is mostly pictures. You can kind of see what's happening. Like, you can see, obviously, the monster and a car. So he was hitchhiking, and then they picked him up, and he killed both of them. And so then, this one's kind of wordy, so I'm going to have to summarize a lot of it. But, like, what happened is there was a cop on the job trying to figure out who this hitchhiker was, why he was doing what he was doing, and he was obviously having a hard time with the fact that, like, he kept having to go see these people die, and he doesn't understand why, and so then he's battling with that. And then he comes up with this idea kind of out of nowhere, really, just saying, like, well, sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little. But what happened first was we kind of find out first what's going on. So as you can see, he finds another victim, but you kind of hear the backstory more of these victims to help understand why the monster is killing them. And so they were fighting, like, this couple was fighting, and so then the guy pulls up on the hitchhiker to kind of have, like, a almost like a barter in between the couple a little bit, like almost have like a third party, so it's not as argumentative and intense in the car, just to break the awkwardness. And so then it ends up being the monster, and then the monster feeds on the like anger and the hatred, I guess, which is also the title of the story. So then he kills her, and then the guy kind of talks about how he was almost a little bit numb to the fact that she was dead, and he was almost like not happy about it, but just not upset about it either. So that was interesting. And then flash forward to the cop sitting talking to his, would you consider that like a chief?
Yeah.
Chief, talking to his boss, obviously, and saying how he thought that the monster was feeding on this hatred, and he was almost thriving off of it, like eating the essence. That's what he fed on. And so then you see he goes, him and his partner, who he does, well, not his partner, but one of his coworkers who he doesn't get along with, he kind of tries to mend that for the time being to work together. And so then they go, he finds him, and then they go to the place where the hitchhiker was last seen. They don't know where he is, but then he says he's reaching his destination tonight, and the destination is the rock festival. And I guess the rock festival, because there's a lot of chaos and a lot of like intensity at festivals because there's so many people, you know, a lot. It's a good place to go to, I guess, have hatred, find hatred, feed off of it, and a lot of people as well. So, and then the cop goes and he talks to all of them, and he's like, you need to have love, so the monster can't feed on the hatred. But then you see the monster, you know, go, and I'm gonna kind of shorten this one a little bit. But then they start singing, happy, they're all happy, but then the monster switches and is no longer consistent, and he kills Willis, which was the cop's, who he tried to mend it was a co-worker, basically, who he was kind of working with.
His partner.
His partner, yes. His partner. And so he kills him right here, and then he's confused on why he killed him, but there must have obviously been some sort of hatred that he was holding on to that he just wasn't mentioning, and so he killed him, and then the monster no longer can feed on hatred because there's not as much hatred, so then they say they have only buried him for a little while because, of course, hatred's going to come back, and so when hatred comes back, he will come back. And so that's the end of that one, and same goes for this one as well, I think, with the colors, and the detailing of the drawing, like, how he made the monster look was definitely, like, as you can see in that corner, was definitely, he was scary. He looked scarier to me. So that's that one. And then I also read this one page called Creepy's, it's called The Golden Sun Disc of the Incas. But this one's from Creepy's Loathsome Lore. So that's that one. And to just briefly talk about it, they just talk about how the golden disc has like mystic powers, and it can cause earthquakes, and it has power to do so. But then, they were supposed to, I think, hide it, but then they ended up just keeping it and forming a group. It's kind of just quickly summarize that one. And then I also read from the same Creepy's Loathsome Lore, I also read a different one. This one doesn't really have a title though, it's just called that. So I'll show you this one. And then I also looked at some of these covers, and I'm just going to briefly go over these, show you these. This one's pretty graphic. It appears like monsters and a faceless something. I don't really know what that is. And then Jaws of Death. Oh, that one's called Creepy and Eerie, cover in Miscellanea Gallery. So I guess that's what this is. And so this is Jaws of Death special issue. So I already talked about that one, so I'm just going to show you again, but I don't think I'm going to mention it too much because I already talked about this one. And then this one's Horror Lives in 7 Tales of Terror in our most shocking issue ever. Read at your own risk. Okay, so like must be a wedding or something. And so then this one, Creepy Super Summer Horror Special, 6 Tingling Monster Epics. Right here. Creepy. I'm not gonna read all that, but you can just see it. It would take too long. And then this one also is definitely. This one's actually called Eerie, not Creepy. And so, as you can see, they're like figures of some sort. And then this one as well, I think they're in love, must be, since also from Eerie. And then there's this one, she's in a tree, appears to be in a tree. The dinosaur, yes. And so, same one, we've already seen both of these, so I'm just not gonna really level on that. And then the last one, Eerie. Looks like a robot. Raiders of the Universe strike in Zud Kamish. And so that's what I read. That's it. And then I'll show you the back too. Okay. So this is the back. You've already seen this. The dinosaur, the woman. And this is by Richard Corbin. That's it. Thank you.